It was a Wednesday afternoon in the quiet town of Maple Ridge, a place where nothing ever seemed to happen. I was at home, flipping through an old family photo album, a habit I'd picked up recently when things felt too overwhelming. The pictures in the album were my way of holding on to something stable, something that reminded me of better times. My daughter, Lily, was playing in the backyard, her laughter echoing in the distance. She was 8, bright, curious, and always had a way of making the world seem lighter. She had just started second grade, and everything was supposed to be perfect. But nothing stays perfect, does it? My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was just another telemarketer. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way the day felt, too quiet, too still, and I picked up. "Hello," I answered, my voice still heavy with the peacefulness of the house. "Is this Rachel Morris?" The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "Yes, this is Rachel. Who's this?" I asked, feeling a flicker of unease in my stomach. "This is Officer Stevens. I'm calling about your daughter, Lily." My heart dropped. The words seemed to take forever to register, and when they did, they hit like a punch to the chest. "What about Lily?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Ma'am, please meet me at Sunrise Mary's Hospital. Your daughter has been involved in an accident." I barely heard the rest of what he said. My mind went numb. I didn't even stop to grab my keys before I ran out the door. My car's engine roared to life, but everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. The rain was coming down hard, splashing against my windshield, but I didn't even feel it. I couldn't focus on anything but Lily. My daughter, my baby, who had just been crossing the street a few blocks from home. How could this happen? Why hadn't she called me? What was going on? The drive to the hospital was a blur. I don't even remember the other cars around me, the wet roads, the sound of the tires slapping against the pavement. All I could think about was Lily. The image of her smiling face, her bright eyes, her energy, everything that made her who she was all I could focus on. What had happened to her? Was she okay? By the time I reached the emergency room, I could hardly breathe. I rushed inside, barely registering the cold air of the hospital. The receptionist directed me to the waiting area, and all I could do was sit there, hands shaking, waiting for someone to come and tell me what was going on. The minutes felt like hours. I stared at the sterile white walls, my mind racing. Then, finally, a doctor walked in. His face was grave, and I could already tell that it wasn't going to be good news. "Mrs. Morris, Lily is stable for now. She's in the ICU, but she's being monitored closely. She was hit by a car while crossing the street." My stomach dropped. Stable? My daughter had been hit by a car, and somehow stable didn't feel like enough. How could she be okay? I wanted to scream, to ask why, but I couldn't find my voice. All I could do was nod, feeling like the world was spinning around me. The hours dragged on like molasses. I stayed in that waiting room, staring at the blank walls, the flickering fluorescent lights above me. The doctor had said Lily was stable, but my mind couldn't settle on that. Stable. It was just a word. I needed more. I needed to know she was okay. But nothing about this felt okay. When Daniel finally called, I felt a tiny spark of relief. He had been away on a work trip, but he'd been texting me all day, checking in on Lily. It was his voice that I needed to hear, but even then, it wasn't enough. "Rachel, what's going on? How's Lily?" he asked, his voice thick with concern. I swallowed hard. "She's alive, Daniel. But she's hurt. She's in ICU. The doctors are optimistic, but I'm scared." My own voice cracked at the last part, and I could hear the tremor in my words. I hated sounding weak, but the truth was I was terrified. There was a long pause before Daniel spoke again. I could practically feel the weight of his silence on the other end of the line. "I'll be home as soon as I can," he said, his voice steady. "I'm sure she'll be okay." "Sure." He was trying to comfort me, but all I could feel was the cold emptiness. I wasn't sure I believed it. I couldn't. The thought of my little girl in that hospital room, alone and scared, sent waves of panic through me. The next morning, I woke up to the harsh reality that nothing was going to go back to normal anytime soon. I hadn't slept a wink the entire night, the events of the previous day running through my mind on repeat. I was exhausted, but my body refused to rest. I had to get to Lily. I had to stay strong for her. I made my way to her ICU room, hoping the sight of her would reassure me. But when I saw her lying in that sterile bed, all the wires and monitors hooked up to her, I couldn't stop the lump in my throat from growing. She looked so small, so fragile. My heart twisted in my chest. This wasn't the way I imagined seeing my daughter. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. I tried to push the fear down, bury it somewhere deep inside. But when the door opened and Detective Harris walked in, I felt something shift. The quiet authority in his demeanor made my skin prickle with unease. "Mrs. Morris," he began, his voice calm, but carrying a weight I couldn't place. "I need to ask you a few questions. It's about the accident." I nodded, swallowing hard, suddenly feeling like I couldn't breathe. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I knew it was shaky. "We've reviewed the security footage from the area," Detective Harris continued. "We saw a man approach Lily just before the incident. She seemed to know him. Can you think of anyone who might have been with her?" I felt a sharp pang in my chest. "No one," I said quickly. "Lily doesn't know anyone in the area. She was by herself." The detective looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We also found something odd. Lily's phone was found near the scene. It was turned off, but it had a text message on it from an untraceable number. The message said, 'Don't worry, everything's going as planned.'" I froze. My stomach lurched. What does that mean? What does any of this mean? The question came out in a whisper, more to myself than to him. "We think it's possible that this wasn't an accident, Mrs. Morris," Detective Harris said, his tone steady but serious. "It might have been intentional." A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't understand. Why would anyone want to hurt Lily? Who would do this to my daughter? The detective paused for a moment, as if waiting for me to process what he had said. But I was too stunned to react. All I could do was sit there, feeling like the world I thought I knew was slipping away from me. The only thing that was clear now was that this wasn't just some random accident. My daughter had been targeted, and I needed to know why. The weight of the detective's words hung in the air long after he left. It was like a fog that wouldn't lift, a cold, suffocating fog that clouded everything. I couldn't stop thinking about that text message, about Lily's phone, and about the man who had been seen with her. I kept replaying the last few hours in my mind, searching for something, anything, that could explain why this had happened. Lily had been such a good girl, always so careful. She never strayed from her routine, always crossed at the crosswalk, never took chances. So why had she been targeted? Who would want to hurt her? The thought of anyone hurting my daughter, my sweet, innocent girl, made my blood run cold. I spent the next few hours pacing the sterile hospital halls, my thoughts racing faster than I could process them. The hospital was eerily quiet, the beeping of machines and the occasional shuffle of nurses the only sounds. I felt like I was in a different world, one where nothing made sense and everything I knew was falling apart. Every few minutes, I checked my phone, hoping to hear from Daniel. But he hadn't called yet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When I went back to Lily's room, I found her asleep, her small body covered with a thin hospital blanket. She looked so peaceful, so fragile. Her face was pale, and the bandages around her head seemed so out of place on my little girl. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand, and tried to push all the fear and questions out of my mind. She was here. She was alive. But for how long? I barely noticed the nurse who entered the room until she spoke. "Mrs. Morris, I need to check Lily's vitals." She moved quietly around the bed, her presence a small comfort in this overwhelming place. As she checked the monitors and scribbled notes, my mind drifted back to the conversation with Detective Harris. He had said Lily seemed to know the man who had approached her, but Lily didn't know anyone in that area. She didn't have any friends who lived nearby, and she certainly didn't talk to strangers. Or so I thought. The nurse finished her task and gave me a kind smile before leaving. But I didn't feel comforted. I felt more lost than ever. How could I not know what was going on in my daughter's life? Had she been keeping something from me? It didn't make sense. The answer came when I was sorting through Lily's backpack later that day. I was looking for a school assignment she'd forgotten to turn in when I found it, folded in the corner of one of the papers. A small note, hastily written and clearly meant to be kept secret. "Don't tell anyone what happened. This is bigger than you think." I froze, my blood turning to ice. What did it mean? Why had Lily written this? Who had she been talking to? The questions swirled in my mind like a storm, each one more terrifying than the last. I showed the note to Detective Harris when he returned later that afternoon. He didn't seem surprised. "Do you recognize the handwriting?" he asked gently. "No," I said, my voice tight, "but I think I know who might." The words came out before I could stop them, and I instantly regretted them. But there was no turning back now. I had to know what was happening, what Lily had gotten herself into. "I'll look into it," Detective Harris said, his expression unreadable. "We'll get to the bottom of this." As he left the room, I sat in the silence of Lily's hospital room, my heart heavy with uncertainty. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. My daughter wasn't just a victim of a hit-and-run accident. She was caught in something much darker. And I wasn't going to stop until I found out what it was. The days that followed felt like they were stuck in a loop, each one longer and heavier than the last. Lily remained in the ICU, her condition stable but fragile, and I spent every waking moment by her side. The doctor's words kept echoing in my mind. "She's stable." But what did that really mean? Stable didn't feel like enough. I needed my daughter back, and I couldn't stop wondering why this had happened. Daniel finally returned home from his work trip, but it didn't feel like a reunion. He was just as stunned as I was, but he wasn't as open about it. He kept his emotions in check, his calm demeanor making me feel like I was losing my mind in a world that was moving too slowly. We barely talked about the incident, about the man Lily had seen or the cryptic message on her phone. It was as if we were both trying to pretend that everything would return to normal soon. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't. Not until I knew the truth. I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel wasn't telling me everything. The way he responded when I mentioned the detective's questions about the man who had approached Lily, he seemed too quick to dismiss it. Maybe I was just imagining things, but I couldn't help but wonder. Could Daniel have been involved somehow? The thought sent a chill through me. I tried to push it away, but I couldn't. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that there were pieces I was missing. Later that week, as I sat in Lily's room, I received another call from Detective Harris. My heart jumped into my throat as I answered. "Mrs. Morris, we found something." His voice came through the line, tense but determined. I sat up straighter, gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. "What is it?" "We've been going through the security footage from the area, and we've identified the man who was with Lily just before the accident. We have a few leads, but we're going to need your help identifying him." My heart was pounding in my chest. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Lily doesn't know anyone in that area. She was alone." "I know," Detective Harris replied. "But the footage shows a man in a dark jacket, someone who was following her before she crossed the street. We believe he might be connected to what happened to her. We'll need you to look at the footage and tell us if you recognize him." I swallowed hard. "I'll come down," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll be there as soon as I can." When I arrived at the police station, Detective Harris was waiting for me. He led me into a small room with a television screen, where a grainy video played. It was hard to make out the details, but I could see the man approaching Lily. His posture, the way he moved, there was something familiar about it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "Do you recognize him?" the detective asked, his voice quiet but insistent. I shook my head, frustration building inside me. "No, I don't know who he is." Detective Harris paused the video and looked at me. "It's not over yet, Mrs. Morris. We're going to keep looking. But we need to dig deeper. There's something here and we're getting closer to it." I wanted to believe him, but the truth felt like it was slipping further and further away. The man in the video seemed to know something I didn't. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't. I had to face the reality that Lily had been caught in something far bigger than I ever could have imagined. When I left the station that day, I felt like a different person. I wasn't just the worried mother sitting by her daughter's bedside anymore. I was someone on a mission, determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. Because if I didn't, I would lose more than just Lily. I would lose myself. The next few days blurred together, a haze of hospital visits, unanswered questions, and sleepless nights. Every time I looked at Lily, I saw the innocent smile of the girl she had been, and it broke me. She was still fragile, still recovering, but the weight of the world seemed to be pressing down on me, threatening to crush me from the inside. I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that I was missing something important, and it was driving me insane. Daniel had been distant. I could see the concern in his eyes when he looked at Lily, but there was something else there too, something that felt like distance. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't ignore it. He was acting strangely. His excuses were thin, and every time I pushed him for answers, he seemed to get more defensive. My heart was heavy with doubt, and I hated myself for even considering it. But could he have known something? Could he have been involved in some way? I shook the thought out of my head, but it lingered like an unwanted shadow. Then came the phone call from Detective Harris that I'd been waiting for. My heart pounded in my chest when I saw his name on the screen. I answered quickly, too quickly. "Mrs. Morris, we've got something." His voice was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath. I sat down on the edge of Lily's bed, my fingers gripping the phone tightly. "What is it?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "We've tracked down the man who was seen in the footage with Lily," Detective Harris said, "and we've learned something unexpected. He has a connection to your family." I froze. The blood drained from my face. "What do you mean? What kind of connection?" I felt dizzy, like I was about to pass out. "We believe this man is connected to someone close to you," the detective said, his words measured. "We're still confirming the details, but it seems like he's been in contact with your husband, Daniel." I felt the ground shift beneath me. The air in the room seemed to grow thicker, heavier. "What? Daniel? How is that possible?" "We're not sure yet," Detective Harris replied, "but we're going to need to speak with him. I suggest you ask him about it. There's a lot we still don't know, but the pieces are starting to fit together." The phone slipped from my hand and landed on the floor with a soft thud. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, and I couldn't wrap my head around what the detective had said. The man who had been following Lily, the one who had pushed her into the street, he was connected to Daniel? My husband? How could this be happening? I didn't know how long I sat there, stunned, my mind reeling. Finally, I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel's number. It rang for what felt like an eternity before he answered. "Rachel?" His voice was strained. "What's going on? Is everything okay with Lily?" I could barely form the words. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking, "I need you to be honest with me. What do you know about this man? The one in the footage with Lily. The detective says he's connected to you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Daniel's breathing, slow and deliberate, but no words came. "Daniel," I repeated, my voice now firm, "what do you know?" Finally he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I knew him at all. Something inside me snapped. "Don't lie to me, Daniel," I said, my voice hard now. "Not about this. Not with Lily's life hanging in the balance." Another pause, longer this time. And then he finally said it. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. But yes, I know him. He's been trying to get me to do something for months. I didn't know what he was really after. But it's not what you think." His words crashed over me like a wave, and I felt like I was drowning. What had my husband been involved in? What had he gotten himself, and worse, Lily, into? I could barely breathe, but I knew one thing for sure. The truth was unraveling, and nothing would ever be the same again. The truth hung heavy in the air, suffocating me. Daniel's confession, if you could even call it that, left me reeling. I barely processed his words at first, too stunned to think clearly. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to demand that he explain everything. But what could he say? How could he possibly explain away his involvement in this mess? "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Daniel had said, his voice cracking like he was trying to justify something. "I thought I could control it, that I could stop it before anything really happened." I wanted to ask him how could he think any of this could be controlled? How could he have let it get this far? But I was frozen, staring at the wall, unable to speak. "Rachel," he said again, softer this time, "I never wanted Lily to get hurt. I never wanted it to go this far." "Then why, Daniel?" My voice broke through the silence, raw and desperate. "Why was this man involved? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you protect us?" Another long silence. He was struggling to find the right words, but there were no right words. He could explain his actions away all he wanted, but there was no making this right. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to bring you into this. His voice was distant now, quieter. But I couldn't do it alone. He made me think it was the only way. The only way? I could barely wrap my mind around it. What could possibly make him think any of this was the only way? And why had he kept me in the dark, kept me from protecting Lily? I had to get answers. I had to understand what Daniel had gotten himself into, how he had become entangled with someone dangerous enough to harm our daughter. My thoughts were racing as I paced around the room. I couldn't just sit here anymore, passively waiting for Daniel to tell me everything. It wasn't enough. I couldn't trust him right now. Not fully. Not until I had the whole story. "We need to talk in person," I finally said, my words sharp. "I'm coming home. You better be ready to tell me everything." I hung up without waiting for a response, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my purse and left the hospital room. Lily was asleep, and though I hated leaving her side, I had no choice. There was no way I could wait any longer for answers. If Daniel truly had a part in this, if he had been involved in orchestrating something so vile, I needed to confront him, face to face. I couldn't allow my daughter to remain in the dark about this. I couldn't keep lying to myself and pretending that everything was fine when my husband had been involved in something that could have cost Lily her life. The drive home was a blur, and by the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were shaking. I felt like I was walking into a house that wasn't mine anymore, a place where trust had been shattered beyond repair. I opened the door slowly, unsure of what I would find inside. Daniel was sitting on the couch, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his expression filled with guilt. I stood in the doorway, feeling like a stranger in my own home. "I'm listening," I said, my voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside me. "Explain it to me, Daniel. All of it." He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. Finally, he exhaled, as if the weight of the confession he was about to make was suffocating him too. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he started again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it would get this out of hand." But as he spoke, I could feel the distance between us widening. The person sitting in front of me wasn't the man I had married. He wasn't the man I had trusted with my daughter's safety. He was a stranger, someone who had chosen to betray us, to pull us into something ugly and dangerous. And just like that, I knew I couldn't forgive him. Not yet. Not after everything he'd kept from me. The weight of Daniel's words settled over me like a fog, but it wasn't a comforting kind of fog. It was dense, suffocating, and it clouded every thought I tried to hold on to. As he explained what had led him to this point, the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, but it only made the truth more impossible to swallow. "I thought I could fix things," he said, his voice full of regret, but I could hear the fear there too. "I got into this mess because I thought I could control it. I thought if I just did what they asked, things would get back to normal. But I was wrong, Rachel. I didn't think it would go this far." He told me about the man in the footage, how they had been working together for months. At first, it had seemed harmless to Daniel. A little favor here, a little work there, a way to make some extra money. The kind of thing you justify when you feel like you have nothing to lose. But then it spiraled. The tasks became more dangerous, the risks higher. I didn't understand how Daniel, the man I'd married, could ever think this was acceptable. How could he think any of it would be harmless? "I never meant for Lily to get hurt," he repeated, like those words would somehow make everything okay again. But they didn't. They couldn't. They just hung in the air like empty promises. I stood there, feeling numb, my mind racing with questions I didn't know how to ask. "Who is he, Daniel?" I finally demanded. "Who is this man, and why did you get involved with him? You've put our daughter's life in danger. I need to understand why you kept this from me, from us." His eyes flickered, guilt painting his face. "His name is Derek. I didn't know much about him at first. He said he had business opportunities, ways to make things better, you know? He talked a good game. I thought I could handle it, but then he started pushing me to do things I didn't want to, things I couldn't get out of." I felt my chest tighten. Derek? I didn't know the name, but I could feel the weight of it like a lead weight dragging us down. Daniel's involvement had gone from questionable decisions to full-blown betrayal, and the thought of it crushed me. "I thought I could control him, Rachel," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "I thought I could protect you and Lily, but I was wrong. I was stupid." I wanted to scream at him, to make him understand how deeply his actions had shaken me, but all I could do was stare at him, feeling this unbearable chasm growing between us. I had always trusted him with everything: my heart, my life, and most importantly, my daughter's safety. And now that trust was shattered beyond repair. "Why didn't you tell me, Daniel?" I whispered, the question heavy on my lips. "Why didn't you come to me when this started? When you knew it was getting worse? Why didn't you ask for help?" "I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just did what he wanted, we could move past it," Daniel muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I thought it was a way out." "A way out?" I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "A way out of what? You've put our daughter in danger, Daniel. She almost died because of you, because of your choices." The words hung between us, harsh and final. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but it didn't matter. I didn't know if it would ever be enough to undo what had been done. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," I said, my voice low and steady. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Daniel didn't answer. The silence between us was deafening, and I realized in that moment that it was over. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't unhear the truth. The damage was done. The man I had married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. And Lily, my daughter, would never be the same. Neither of us would ever be the same again. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes the people closest to you can surprise you in the worst ways. The key? Always trust your instincts, take responsibility for your actions, and never be afraid to confront the truth, no matter how hard it is. And remember, forgiveness is a personal choice, but accountability is crucial. If you've ever found yourself in a situation that seems too crazy to believe, you're not alone. Speaking of unbelievable stories, if you want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to the Revenge Protocol YouTube channel. Hit that like button, leave a comment, and let's share some wild stories together.